The Texas Supreme Court heard arguments today on whether the state's abortion bans hurt women with complicated pregnancies. It's part of an ongoing lawsuit filed by a group of Texas women who say they were denied abortions despite grave risks to their own lives or to their fetuses. A lawyer for the Center for Reproductive Rights, which filed the suit on behalf of the women and two doctors, said the bans have left doctors confused about what care they can provide.
The abortion bans as they exist today subject physicians like my clients to the most extreme penalties imaginable: life in prison and loss of their medical license. And while there is technically a medical exception to the bans, no one knows what it means, and the state won't tell us.
In August, a lower court judge temporarily exempted women with medically complicated pregnancies from the state's abortion bans. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton immediately appealed that decision. Today, a prosecutor for the state argued that 20 women and two doctors suing the state lacked the ability to seek clarity, since it would only apply to hypothetical scenarios. But the attorney for the women said the women suing said the effects of the Texas ban are already quite clear, citing the situation faced by the lead plaintiff, Amanda Zarowski.
We are not talking about hypothetical harms. These are real patients, many of whom are sitting in the courtroom today. And for example, Ms. Zarowski became septic while waiting to be sick enough to receive abortion care, and she had multiple surgeries to reconstruct her uterus, 3 days in the ICU, and now her fertility is compromised.
Joining me now is Amanda Zarowski, lead plaintiff for the Texas abortion ban lawsuit. Good to see you, Amanda. The last time I saw you, there were 5 plaintiffs. Now there are 20 plus 2 doctors. That is not surprising. I think that was the expected outcome, that more women would be harmed. But I want to let you listen to one of the arguments that was made, which to me seems pretty astounding. An attempt to deny that you and your 19 co-plaintiffs have standing to bring this suit. Take a listen.
Your position is that in order to seek the kind of clarity that these plaintiffs are seeking, you have to have a woman who is pregnant, who has some health condition that she believes places her life at risk or impairment to a major bodily function, but her doctor says, I don't think it does, and she has to then sue the doctor and maybe the Attorney General at that point, and then she would have standing.
I don't know if that would be the only circumstance, but you would at least then know that the law is the problem and not the doctor refusing to perform an abortion.
Amanda, the judge seemed a bit confused by it, as am I. Your thoughts on that argument?
Everyone was confused by this, right? The claim in and of itself, the audacity to say essentially that a pregnant patient would have to be in some sort of dire situation in the middle of this situation to have standing is just absurd. In my particular situation, what that would have meant is while my amniotic fluid was running down my leg, that's when I would have been able to pursue legal action. But in my case, I went septic hours later. So I would have died in court trying to fight. And that's what the state is saying I should have done. It doesn't make any sense.
And it sounds like they're saying that, as you said, if you were in that catastrophic situation, which you could die from, you'd have to take the time to first sue your doctor. And then only after that, you could sue over the law. That seems nonsensical. And it also sounds like the state of Texas is saying that women need to come near to death before they can get relief.
That's exactly what it sounds like they're saying. And it sounds to me like they would want me to essentially die trying before they'll admit that I was harmed.
Can you sort of sort through, and we're not trying to get you to be a psychiatrist here for the people, the men who run your state, and I guess the woman who was part of the prosecution there, but it sounds as if the state of Texas is saying you must attempt to give birth or die, and that women don't have any other choice but that. No matter what the circumstance, you give birth or die, and that they really don't want to allow any other option. Am I overreading that?
I can't begin to get into the minds of the lawmakers in my state, and I certainly wouldn't want to, but I don't think you're overreaching. We have plaintiffs on the case who had non-viable pregnancies or who had babies who were not going to survive, and they still said that that's something that should have happened, and they should have to carry to term regardless of the outcome or the eventual outcome of that child's life.
Have you seen in the state of Texas any sort of genuine political backlash? One of the things that has surprised me is the lack of political backlash in states like Texas, states like Georgia, where they have these 6-week abortion bans, or states like Missouri, where they have total abortion bans. Whereas in states that are proposing them or proposing the opportunity to protect abortion rights, there is this huge outgrowth of women support, from all political parties rushing out to say, no, I want to protect myself. But the backlash piece in states that have already done it, do you see it in the state of Texas?
I think we are seeing it. I just think it's a long game. It's a hard battle to win. It's going to take a long time. And I think we know that. But I think we see it happening. I think the midterm elections last year, we saw some of those margins shrink. And we're just going to have to keep chipping away. We know this isn't something that we're going to be able to change overnight. The overturning of Roe was a 50-year war, and hopefully this one won't be quite so long, but we know that it's going to take some time.
Yeah, it is a cautionary tale that we mustn't give up our hard-won rights easily simply by electing the wrong United States senators and presidents, because it can take, as you said, decades to get them back. Your fellow plaintiffs, how are they doing? How are people's spirits in terms of this lawsuit?
It's a good question. I think we're all over the board in terms of, where we are personally. I think as far as the lawsuit specifically, we're very encouraged. I think we're optimistic. I think we're very hopeful. No matter what happens with our lawsuit, I think it's a win-win situation, because if the state of Texas does not side with us, if the Supreme Court doesn't agree with us, I think all that's going to do is create an enormous amount of outrage, which is just fuel for the fire, and it's more motivation to keep fighting. If they do side with us, obviously a win's a win, and that's great. So I think we're very optimistic, and we're seeing action similar to what's going on in Texas being taken in other states, and that's so encouraging, and that's what it's going to take. We all have to fight on all fronts.
Women of America, control of your state legislature, control of the governorship, and deciding who is in the United States Senate. It literally could be a matter of life and death and autonomy for you. Vote smart. Amanda Zurawski, you're very brave, and I'm glad that you are in this fight. Thank you. It is good to see you, and wishing you the best of luck in your lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.